might live and breathe the gospel of Jesus Christ. Amen. Good morning again, everyone, and happy Memorial Day weekend. We look forward to opening our doors tomorrow. Thank you to all of you who have signed up. The sign-up sheet is still out there. We can always use extra hands. This weekend serves as the beginning of the summer season. Unofficially, it's a season that will be spent in the church seeking after new models of ministry, both here and in the church at large. This past week, as we sort of heard in some of our committee meetings earlier this week, it was a busy week here in the church. Last Sunday, several of you were at this. We had an excellent discussion about some of the legislation facing the Michigan Annual Conference of the United Methodist Church this year. That legislation and more will be voted on next week in Traverse City, and Bill and I will both be there representing Walled Lake United Methodist. So thanks again to everyone who participated in that discussion and in the ones leading up to it. The dedication that you've shown, the commitment that our membership has shown to the future of this church has been very inspiring. I appreciate the feedback we've received and the input that we have received. Among the many things we discussed on Sunday was the idea of consensus building and of the flow of the Holy Spirit among groups of people. And I've observed multiple times that there seems to be a kind of spiritual awakening among both our congregation and our denomination at large. And the United Methodist Church is looking for new ways forward, even as it seems our worldwide structure is hindering some of our ministries, as it also gives to many of our ministries, like Mobility Worldwide. The work of the gospel is never done, and the boundaries of the church have never been able to contain the overwhelming flow of the Holy Spirit. Following that discussion on Sunday, I drove down to Ann Arbor for a meeting with the board of directors at the University of Michigan's Wesley Foundation. This is the official campus ministry of the United Methodist Church. Perhaps some of you have been involved in it before. And at that meeting, we discussed, as you might guess, new models of ministry for the foundation and for the United Methodist Church at large. We reflected together on the impact of these recent events in the church. And there was a little bit of hand-wringing about the future of the foundation and the financial implications of a potential restructuring of the church. But more important than this, there were the fruits of ministry that are being born through the Wesley Foundation, through its ministry there on campus, and through the conversations and worship services that have taken place this past year. It's clear that the Holy Spirit has been flowing there too, and that there has been an awakening there too. And that was only Sunday. On Monday night, we held our latest Ad Council meeting. Many of you were there. We looked at the next few months in our church calendar. We did our normal church housekeeping. But over the next 6 months or so, we looked ahead. We're going to have 3 different worship series planned. Our 2 worship series in the fall are going to deal with church in the modern world. And I'll save more details about those for another day. But during the summer, as we talked about on Monday night, our worship series will encourage us all to do something new, both as a church and as individuals. And this is why we're asking for new volunteers for our counting, ushering, nursery, liturgist, greeting teams. It's also why we're asking for new committee volunteers later in the summer as we prepare to update our church leadership list. The spiritual grounds for this series, it comes from the journey that we've all been on together since Easter Sunday. We find ourselves at the conclusion of the season of Easter, and we have embraced the theology of resurrection and new life. This summer, as we transition into the season of Pentecost, into the age of the Holy Spirit, we're looking at models of church renewal that are spirit-based, that are theologically grounded, and that are active and life-giving for their members and the communities around them. There is an awakening happening all over. So our summer worship series is going to try to tap into that awakening and to learn from previous stories of renewal. Okay, so that was just Sunday to Monday when all of those conversations happened. On Tuesday evening, I returned to Ann Arbor for a meeting with the Heritage District leadership team. And I promise I'm not just bragging about how busy I was earlier this week. The amazing thing about all of these events and meetings was the common threads flowing among them and between them. At that meeting, we discussed, surprise, surprise, the future of the denomination in Michigan, the response to General Conference and the plans for next week's annual conference, and most importantly, the events that we have in store for the Heritage District in the next 6 months. We have been living into new models of ministry at nearly every level of the church this past year, at the local level and at the campus level, at the worldwide and at the denominational level, top to bottom, at the state and annual conference level, and at the district level. I probably should have done those in order. I did them out of order, which is confusing. Oh well. We've got a new district superintendent. We've got a new set of churches that we've welcomed into our district from elsewhere. And among the plans we discussed for this district were plans to clean up and revitalize our district campground at Judson Collins, to offer new events for laity as well as clergy to be in fellowship with one another, to simplify the annual church conference process for local churches, and to develop a set of workshops and a theme for our annual district conference that's happening next fall. And yes, there are a lot of conferences to keep track of too. I won't quiz you all at the end. They're all happening at different times and different levels of the church. One of the suggestions for this particular event was to offer new workshops designed to meet the needs of current churches in their new contexts, rather than following old patterns that have left many frustrated. So these will include workshops on alternate forms of ministry that reach out to the community in new, different places: coffee shops, pubs, public parks, homeless shelters, community centers, beaches, retirement homes, hospitals. They might include new models for the organization of the church, different options for committee structure, and easier methods of communication at the local and district levels. All of it is focused on how to get out of the way of the Holy Spirit and to let that Spirit flow rather than becoming static in our ministry, which we often do. In all of these places, we were looking at new models of ministry. In all of these places, there is a spiritual discernment that's taking place. So, that was kind of a week in the life of a local pastor, and I'll stop right there on Tuesday. It may not sound exciting, but for those of us who are curious about the future of the church and who wish to become more involved in ministry, the Holy Spirit is active. It is flowing through us. And it is delivering us into new models of ministry that have the power to revitalize the church and to renew its work in the gospel of Christ. Now, as long as we remain committed to doing this good work, that Holy Spirit will continue to flow. It will breathe new life into our ministry and the world. And that is the exact promise that Jesus makes to his disciples in this reading in the book of Glory, When I say we have to remain committed to the work of ministry, what I really mean is what Christ says. Anyone who loves me will obey my teaching. God the Father will love them, and we will come to them and make our home with them. Those who do not love me will not obey my teaching. These words you hear belong to the one who sent me. To do the work of ministry is to confess our love of Christ and our faith in the grace of God and in the flow of the Holy Spirit. Jesus promises that Holy Spirit to us following his death. I have spoken this while I am with you, but later the Advocate, the Holy Spirit, whom God will send in my name, will teach you all things, will remind you of what I have said. And Christ leaves them with peace and reminds us not to let our hearts be troubled. As long as our ministry is rooted in the love of Christ and the flow of the Spirit, it will continue to lead us down new paths of revitalization and rebirth. When we remain committed to the truth of the gospel, when we radically offer the grace of God to the world, then that vision from Revelation holds true. When the gates of the kingdom will be open and the river of the water of life as clear as crystal flows from God down the middle of our streets, and the leaves of the trees serve the healing of the nations. This is the work that has been laid before us. It is continuously leading us to places of renewal by the power of the Holy Spirit. So let us not ignore that power. Let's open our doors tomorrow and every day, and let that power flow throughout all the world. Amen and amen.